Welcome back. Detained Binance executive Tigran Gambaryan has initiated legal action against Nigeria's National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu and Economic Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC), alleging violations of his fundamental rights. Gambaryan, represented by lawyer Olujoke Aliyu, seeks relief before Justice Iyan Ekwo, alongside Nadeem Anjarwalla, Binance Africa Regional Manager, who escaped custody. Both filed separate suits against ONSA and EFCC, demanding release and passports return, citing constitutional breaches. To help us understand this, I have Dr. Iwa Salami, Associate Professor in Financial Law and Regulation, University of East London, England, United Kingdom. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. I'd like to start with, what you make of the lawsuit filed by the Binance executives. Let's talk about both of them now.
So, of the lawsuit filed by Binance executives, basically it's a reaction claiming that there has been a violation of their rights because, as we know, basically what they came for was to have a meeting with the authorities in Nigeria to really deal with the issues around, some of the tax evasion allegations and the opportunity basically to have a conversation as to, how the company, potentially would seek to resolve this issue. And then, of course, whilst that was happening, they got detained, which wasn't the expectation. So the expectation that was that they were coming to have this meeting because, of course, we know that Nigeria is such a huge market for in crypto assets, particularly for Binance, which is the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. And so therefore Nigeria is quite an important market. And in honoring the invitation, they got detained. Now it has to be said though that although it appears that there seems to be a certain form of deception here that they were actually brought in to be detained, it's actually possible that in the meetings and interviews that they're having, there may actually come out as a new, fresh information could actually come out that actually there has been a violation or a breach that then requires or warrants that more answers needs to be provided by a business. And in this case, this seems to be what has happened, that in the conversations that were being had, it became evident that actually the Nigerian authorities felt that Binance had violated certain rules and therefore detained the officials.
All right, so as an associate professor in law and regulation, I would like to ask, looking at Nigeria's handling of this case, do you think it followed, due process, really?
So it's a quite tricky one because on the face of it, you would think that, these people came in to have a conversation with the authorities because, if they knew they were going to be detained, they would certainly wouldn't have, attended the meeting. But it is the case, though, that, if there has been allegations of misgivings or violations of, in this case now, quite severe allegations of tax violations, of course, according to Nigerian law, there is that provision there to have them detained. This isn't particularly great. It doesn't look good for the authorities in Nigeria, nor does it look good for business moving forwards, particularly around crypto asset funds and also businesses that actually want to come in to do, to engage in whatever type of transaction they're wanting to, and particularly for foreign companies as well, and as to how their employees would be protected if they come for potentially meetings like this, or if they're actually on ground. So it's, on the face of it, I'd say it's an unfortunate situation because you have two officials coming in to have a meeting to help preserve the huge markets that they have in the country, and then they ended up being detained. Anybody hearing that would obviously feel, oh my goodness, this cannot be right. But then if you look at if you kind of take a back seat to see what's going on, tax evasion is a big deal in every country, and particularly for a country like Nigeria, whose economy is going through quite a bit of pain, and particularly around the role that the authorities believe that crypto asset exchanges, such as Binance, are playing, and the impact they have on the naira itself. So there have been, a few months, I'd say a month or so back, there have been these issues around the impact of the outflow of foreign exchange through crypto assets exchanges, the big ones, and Binance being an example here, one of the big ones here, and therefore the impact that has on the naira, and is a big one for authorities to worry about. And so these, if you like, if you kind of contextualize things, this is the environment under which this action has been taken by the regulatory authority. And like I say, tax evasion is a big issue across the world. And if these are allegations that have been tabled before, Binance, then it's something that really needs to be looked at. And again, this is the unfortunate thing that happens with crypto assets, the crypto asset business. It's a global one, which then means that if crypto asset exchanges are, have to deal in countries where we have citizens transacting huge numbers, particularly huge numbers in a country like Nigeria, transacting on exchanges, then of course there would be an interest to ensure that tax provisions are actually implemented or are complied with. I beg your pardon. And in this case, there are allegations that have been tabled, and Binance really haven't been able to answer, hence this action being brought against them.
But Professor, talking about tax evasion, I mean, that's a big one if we are to talk about it. But then remember that the SEC had already issued, this particular circular saying that Binance was not trading legally in Nigeria and that it wasn't being, what's the word, regulated and all of that. So I'm wondering, this is an institution, or let's say a company that is not being regulated. This is a company that is, operating illegally in the country, and that this same company is allowed to trade for so long. And at first, why did Nigeria even allow Binance to trade or to continue whatever it was doing for so long before, beginning to take some action? And then now you're also talking about, tax evasion. I want us to understand, to help us understand these two really. When you talk about tax evasion for a company that is operating illegally.
Okay, so that's a very good question. And the issues around the regulation of crypto assets, have been a quite hairy one, because when cryptocurrency exchanges began to operate, a few good years ago, there were no regulatory arrangements or framework for them. There wasn't any requirements for crypto exchanges to comply with the most basic regulatory requirements, such as to know the people that are transacting on them, such as what we commonly refer to as KYC, know your customer requirements. So all the exchanges across the world were operating, and the nature of cryptocurrency exchanges is that they're not your traditional brick and mortar, exchanges. These are exchanges that really are facilitated and really operate and run on blockchains, and therefore, it's very possible that you could have exchanges operating, and because it's very global, very possible that you would have individuals that are interested in engaging in crypto asset exchanges or cryptocurrency exchanges, buying and transacting on those exchanges. And originally, we had a lot of that happening across the world. But as regulation became an issue, and as authorities began to find that actually these are big businesses transacting globally across the world, and of course, across the world, and then also obviously allegations around money laundering and terrorism financing, links with cryptocurrency exchanges, it began to become obvious that there was a need to actually put regulatory framework in place. So the framework, as is the case in most of financial developments that we see, the regulation usually would come, usually comes after, and this has most certainly been the case with crypto asset exchanges. So we're kind of working our way back, not just only in Nigeria, indeed across the world, to put regulatory frameworks in place, whether that's sort of knowing the people that are transacting, KYC provisions, or indeed tax provisions or tax regulatory frameworks sort of in place as well. So the answer to your question really is that there has been a slow, if you like, a slow rollout of regulation for crypto asset exchanges, but across the world, these are actually coming to fore, and these are actually being put in place. The question really is how regulators would want to approach regulating their own dimensions or their own aspect, the way I'd say actually the transaction, the impact on them. So, for example, a few years back, we had the US IRS, Inland Revenue Service, really bring an action against Coinbase and asking, knowing that the certain of the parties that have been transacting, they were in violation of tax, and basically asking that Coinbase really let them know or give them the names of a list of certain parties that they had identified as actually violating provisions. So there are mechanisms for countries to put in place certain, if you like, provisions in place to actually get, to know what is actually going on in certain on those exchanges.
If you can hear me, Professor, I want us to narrow this down and just take it right home. I'm saying that if you're operating illegally, are you still expected to pay tax at the same time while the the regulators have identified or spotted you as an illegal entity, and at the same time you're also expected to pay tax? I just want you to help us clear up that aspect.
Okay. So there are two things here. Now, Binance, the action that was brought against the organization that claimed to be Binance Nigeria, I think last month or a few weeks ago, that was deemed as operating illegally, had no relationship with Binance, the global firm that is in question here. So just to clarify that. Now that Binance Nigeria organization or entity, Binance, the global firm, had dissociated any links with it. That entity was not registered. I beg to say that that's not the entity we're talking about here. The entity we're talking about here is Binance, the global exchange. So that entity, yes, was operating illegally, whatever it was. But the actual issue at stake here is that we've got Binance, the global exchange officials who have come for a meeting because, of course, Nigeria is a big market for them.
Okay. All right. So in closing now, Professor, what potential outcomes, can be expected from the upcoming court proceedings scheduled for April 8th?
So basically, they've been arraigned. What they're going to be asked to do would be to plead. So they're given the opportunity to plead whether they're guilty or not guilty. And of course, we know that, I'd be surprised if they plead sort of guilty to this. And then after that, a trial date will be set. So this can potentially be a long drawn case that we have here.
Okay.
And it's hoped that it will be ironed out, because it doesn't give it's not a very good case for the industry at large, I'd say, to be honest.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Iwa Salami, for sharing your thoughts with me today on Business Edge.
Thank you for having me.